We are those guys. Hey, you see these guys over there? Well, don't forget about those guys and don't forget about us because we are back in the new year. Nick Ferguson, welcome to 2026. The NFL regular season has come to a close. We got wild card weekend coming up just a few days from now. So, playoff football, Nick Ferguson, how's that make you feel?
Playoff football makes me feel both happy and sad at the same time. Happy because we're now moving on to the postseason. Sad because I can't get those much needed end of season bonuses.
that's that's right, my man. Your pod incentive was, you had 500K on the line if we put out X number of podcasts, but you're just a family man,
Yeah.
myself as well. So we took some time to be with our loved ones. I mean, look, the
Yeah.
reality is, your Denver Broncos, my New England Patriots, were cruising towards the finish. So what else was there even to talk about? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the NFC South and the AFC North being settled on Saturday and Sunday, respectively,
Yeah.
for Week 18. So I think three games worth highlighting because it wasn't your Broncos, it wasn't my Patriots, and shoot, it certainly was not the three seed Jacksonville Jaguars with that butt whooping they put on those Tennessee Titans. But we've got a lot of things to get to. I think a handful of games from Week 18. We'll get to Black Monday as well. We are coming to you Monday following four additional firings at the head coaching position, GMs as well. So six NFL head coaching spots open. Nick Ferguson, you can certainly throw your hat into the ring if so choose. We can get into the success you had in my Madden '06 franchise with Nick Ferguson as head coach of the New England Patriots in another realm. But first, Nick, I want to start with we'll go chronologically. Saturday, the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are duking it out for the NFC South. Well, sort of. The Panthers win and they're in. However, they fall 16-14. They were battling the elements. They were battling officials. Just an ugly game that, well, Carolina ends up losing and yet making the playoffs. I mean, you want to do a little Game of Thrones here? It was a trial by combat because we saw Panthers Bucks only for Falcons Saints to then serve as who gets into the postseason. Crazy stuff for the NFC South.
Yeah, it was like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Two men enter, one man leaves. And that's the worst place you want to be, sitting either on a Saturday or Sunday, kind of biting your nails, watching the television, watching every single play, hoping that things fall your way. And for a second there, it looked as though, the Falcons were going to run away with it. The Saints made a triumphant comeback, only for the Falcons to just kind of continue to, I guess, move in the right directions with wins. Far too late to save their coach's job. We'll get into that later. But if you were the Bucks, man, and you were Todd Bowles, you got to think it was a Thursday night football game where it was like a fourth down play with Kirk Cousins. All you had to do is make sure you keep everything in front of you, keep everything inside the numbers, and not give up the outside throw to Kirk Cousins on cover two, in which that ended up being the dagger and Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers in their season. And then they had to rely on the Saints and Tyler Shuck to be their saviors and God, please help us get in. But the Saints, you would think, the Saints, right? The Saints, God help us. They didn't help them at all.
It's just kind of funny too because for Carolina it came down to just needing to beat the Saints once. I mean, listen, I haven't really dug through it, but like how many times has a team won their division while losing both of their games to the fourth place team within the division? Like they dropped both their games to the Saints. The Saints finished dead last in the NFC South. I just can't recall when the 8-9 Panthers, maybe a 7-9 Seahawks team losing to the St. Louis Rams twice. I don't know, but it is just a team has to win the division, and it seems like nobody cared to do it. And I was just fascinated with that game on Saturday in that standalone position, not really even mattering. Like you play the game Saturday, and then you sit and wait up Sunday, 24 hours later, just to see the Atlanta Falcons do it for you. Look, they won five straight, and really all they did was, change the Rams draft pick to 13th overall, and we'll get to we'll get to Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot when we get to Black Monday. How about the most interesting division battle Sunday night? The Steelers and the Ravens. Let's throw out I don't know, 52 minutes of football because the last 6 minutes or so of the Steelers comeback against the Baltimore Ravens, which included, I believe, 3 helmets for Aaron Rodgers, about 4 different tush pushes. Like this Steelers game was ridiculous. Of course, capped off by a pair of missed kicks. I don't want to take too much credit, but as soon as I saw that holy water being used pregame, I texted my in-laws, all Steelers, Pittsburgh natives. I said the Steelers, they're not losing this game.
Yeah.
Quote, Steelers. I said the Steelers are going to win tonight because they had, more than
Divine
just the
intervention.
fortunate bounce of the football on their side.
That game was really interesting because when you think about, Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, how long they've both been in their respective teams, one 19 seasons, the other 18 seasons. And the crazy thing about it is these two coaches had their fan bases rooting for them to be fired. So much so for Mike Tomlin, there was a chant, fire Tomlin, which I could not believe, but that is something that happened. But this
Well, the
reminds
good thing was they booed Sticks when Renegade came on. That's a good thing. I'm not a Sticks guy.
right, but that's been the staple of Pittsburgh for so many years, and you boo that. It's just like, oh my God, what are they doing in Pittsburgh? But this was one of the classic meetings between these two teams because when we look at the 18, 19 years that these two organizations have clashed, it has basically come down to either one or the other, right? So regardless of what we saw early on in the season, saw Baltimore get out to a slow start. They lost to the Bills to start off the season. Lamar Jackson was injured, and everyone was wondering when he was going to come back. What is going to be like when he comes back? Will he be ready? And then also, what's going on with the Steelers? They can't find a receiver, even though they have MVS. They had to go get Adam
Well,
Thielen, who was on his
I
third
mean,
team.
listen, the guy that Detroit fan was like public enemy number one for Pittsburgh because without DK Metcalf, the 2 leading receivers, MVS, 7 targets for a guy who came off the couch and is on his 3rd team of the year. Adam Thielen, also on his 3rd team of the year, coming off the
Yes.
couch, and these are the 2 leading guys. Scotty Miller, who was catching balls from Tom Brady his rookie season in Tampa Bay, all of a sudden being called upon. I mean, the best players on that offense are Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren, and they just, again, kind of in the similar boat as Carolina, like they are incapable of creating big shot plays, but that still doesn't mean that Aaron Rodgers played a great game. That still doesn't mean that Mike Tomlin technically outcoached John Harbaugh. I mean, I have a a long-standing tradition of clowning John Harbaugh for being an awful situational coach in the postseason, and I can get to that because we're going chronologically here. But like, it was just the most Pittsburgh Steelers game ever. They get down to the 1 yard line. They've got one play at the end of the half, and they run this awful pitch after motioning Freiermuth off of the play. Gainwell just gets absolutely smothered. They run the tush push. See, Philly tried to claim the brotherly shove, but when Pittsburgh sends Cam Hayward to shove his little brother Connor Hayward's ass,
Well,
that's
wait,
the
wait, wait.
brotherly shove.
Let's be totally honest. Technically it's his little brother, but he's not that freaking little.
No, Cam is much bigger than his little brother. Like it is a TJ Derek Watt situation which Pittsburgh used to have. One is the star defensive player who is critical to that team's success, and the other is a fullback.
Right. But it all worked the same. And here's what I'll say really quickly about this particular game. It just goes to show you, man, how these divisional games matter the most. And it doesn't make a difference what the fans are saying, what the records are. And most of the time, Alex, that's what everyone says about every divisional game. I can't
Mm-hmm.
say that. When it comes
Yep.
to the black and blue division, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, this is what you expect. So what we saw was what we hope to see all season long. And with Lamar Jackson coming off of injury, and it just seemed as though all their hopes were lost, he kept finding Zay Flowers. And I'm like, Pittsburgh Steelers, Are you going to find him on the field or what? Because he's running wide freaking open.
What is Patrick Queen doing being one-on-one in coverage against Zay Flowers? Like, Terrell Austin, a.k.a. Terrible Austin's defense, is just the Steelers do what they do, and if Zay Flowers is going to beat them once, he's going to beat them 2-3 times as well. Getting to the end of the game, we have the power of using hindsight. 2 missed kicks, Nick. This is my John Harbaugh rant that the guy is just awful situationally. They had 12 seconds and a timeout left, and they decide to kneel the ball. They lose about 2 or 3 yards to try to put the rookie Tyler Loop in the optimal position to kick that field goal. 44 yards. I guess, that like he had been perfect from inside 50, so I understand the confidence, but it's still a rookie with the season on the line. Again, I know this is with hindsight, but you have the 12 seconds, you have the timeout, you have Derrick Henry. I don't know if you're a Pittsburgh fan, would you rather see them trot out Loop to kick that ball, or would you be more interested in seeing Derrick Henry like an opportunity to try to strip that football? Or I'm just trying to play the hypothetical, like, would they have been better off trying to gain a couple more yards rather than losing a couple of yards if it involves the risk of possibly, dropping the football on the ground? Because Harbaugh, to just get to within 40-something yards and go, okay, that's it, let's send the kicker out, I don't necessarily agree with that.
Neither do I, but I guess this is me trying to think as Coach Harbaugh, thinking in this particular situation, he doesn't want to risk a fumble. We've seen Derrick Henry, as great as he was as of late, early on in the
Well,
season, especially the
you
Buffalo
mentioned the
game.
Buffalo game.
Right. He put the ball on the turf. So for me, yes, hindsight being 2020 with that little amount of time, maybe there's one more play you can get to just to get a little closer, because before those kicks were considered chip shots. They're not chip shots anymore, because I remember how the season started off. There were several missed kicks. There were several block kicks, maybe more so than we've ever seen in NFL history. So those kicks are no longer guaranteed chip shots. So if you could get a little closer, still burn a little off the clock, then maybe you do it. Maybe that's something that he's thinking about. Hindsight being 2020, he would have done differently. But it was what it was, and I felt for Looper so bad. I've never been in a situation as a player where a play came down to me and me alone, but I felt so sorry for him that he had to kind of endure that. And I hope it makes him stronger. But once again, like my son told me, Dad, that game didn't come down to that particular moment. And it wasn't Looper's fault, because guess what? The Baltimore Ravens should have been able to put up more points to ensure that it wasn't just a field goal game.
Yeah, and I know full well, the Steelers make those, 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns in large part because Kyle Hamilton exited that game. Alohi Gilman exited that game after they collided into each other. And maybe this is more semantics, but like if you have 2 guys dealing with a head injury, can't you fit 2 guys in the blue tent? Like if we're dealing with concussions here, they're
Alex,
standing there. They're standing there like waiting to get into a club. Like, hold on, one man in, one man out. Like, they're both dealing with head injuries, Nick. Like,
well,
why are we playing
Alex,
bouncer? Where's Brian Daboll playing bouncer to like get these guys into the tent?
well, you can't do that because you have an independent neurologist. You have to service each guy independently to determine the symptoms. Can they actually go back in the game? Are they surviving whatever the protocol is? Now, I get it. Is it wasting time? And it wasted time for the Baltimore Ravens having 2 of their defensive players off the field. Absolutely. Maybe some rules changes because of that. But as it stands now, no, you have to wait your turn and allow each one of those guys to actually go into the tent, because like you mentioned Brian Dable. They were fine because guess what? Dable was over there pressing the independent neurologist, trying to speed up, Jackson Dart to get him out of the tent. That's not part of the standard protocol.
Well, if this were a year ago and Steeler fans were booing Russell Wilson, maybe Mike Tomlin would do the same thing. Daboll was just doing his due diligence, making sure those New York fans saw as little of Russell Wilson as possible. So I get it now. He lost his job, but at the time, he was saving the New York fan base from having to deal with more let's ride. And I like I am just kind of amazed. Like this whole game is broken down to the last few minutes there. Aaron Rodgers can still say 42 years old and he was out there making plays. Like for as much as I kind of think he's nauseating for comments off the field and, podcast appearances and ayahuasca trips, like the guys love playing for him. And frankly, I don't think there's a better option for the Steelers, certainly the rest of this year, but to run it back for 43 years old. I mean, we'll get into it maybe once their season comes to a close, but I genuinely believe that Aaron Rodgers is the best option for this Steelers offense, at least, through this year and through 2026, which is kind of unbelievable to say.
I don't think it's unbelievable to say because it takes a special organization and a head coach and locker room to deal with a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, I mean, he's a polarizing figure based on certain things that he says off the field. Either you like it or you hate it. I don't hate everything about Aaron Rodgers. And it's proven that Aaron Rodgers, as arrogant as he is, and you have to be to play that particular position at a high level. Like your guy, Tom Brady, when I played against him, very nice guy, very arrogant
Sure.
on the field, right? But but that's the competitive part of him. Peyton Manning was the same way. I mean, and there were so many other players who played the quarterback position. Hell, Philip Rivers was definitely that way. He just didn't know how to curse, right? But he was definitely competitive. You need to have that in your organization, and you see how that's helped throughout the season because you play several games without DK Metcalf. That it was so embarrassing that they lost to the Cleveland Browns the way that they lost to the Cleveland Browns. But look at it this way. He was able, both he, the team, and Mike Tomlin was able to keep the team together through all this chaos. And oh, by the way, they're about to get DK Metcalf right back. Right? Now I know no one would have thought this before. And I know they face a massive challenge at home against the Houston Texans and that Houston Texans defense. But there's a possibility that the Pittsburgh Steelers could emerge as not just a dark horse, but a scary team to play.
Well, I honestly, the Houston matchup, I think they match up much better compared to some other teams in the AFC. So I can't wait to break that one down when we come back later this week to do the official wild card breakdown. And the one that really, really intrigues me is the third meeting of the Packers and the Bears in the last month when Green Bay goes back to Chicago, the frozen tundra, if you will, for a rematch, more or less. The Green Bay Packers, Nick, I think come in with as little steam as a playoff team possibly could. They become the fourth team in the modern NFL history to lose 4 straight games to end the year and still make the playoffs. Of course, we hadn't seen it in decades until, oh wait, the Pittsburgh Steelers a year ago. But like, losing Micah Parsons was just, awful for them. The setbacks that Jordan Love had been dealing with and, just looking like awful against the likes of Minnesota and then Chicago again. Any takeaways from what you saw Caleb Williams do? I mean, the last time the Packers won a game, it was when Caleb threw that end zone interception to end the game. And they haven't won a game since. It's been a month. So I want to give the edge to Chicago, especially with how strongly they've finished and how efficient that offense has been and the ability that Caleb Williams has to create these plays. And since costing them that game against Green Bay, hasn't had any of those kinds of mistakes.
I still get a nod to the Chicago Bears because, I mean, we watched them play against the San Francisco 49ers and Brock Purdy. That was one hell of a game. It was a definitely high-scoring game, and it came down to who had the ball the last, and the Bears had it. They just could not punch it in because they didn't get adequate protection. But I still have faith and confidence in Caleb Williams and that Chicago Bears team led by Ben Johnson because here's what they do. They still run the ball. They still have a decent defense. Now, their defense is kind of, thrived off of turnovers. And when they don't force turnovers, now they're just kind of as mediocre as any other defense in the league. But I have faith in them based on, what we're talking about as far as Chicago for the Green Bay Packers. they've had their issues. Malik Willis had to fill in for Jordan Love, who was suffering from a concussion. And one thing I can tell you about concussions, once you get one, that second one is buy one, get one free, right? That's kind of the concept.
Man.
So I know it sounds bad, but that's exactly how it happened. So you got to think, okay, well, how long would Jordan Love actually play in the game? And I'm thinking maybe the guy who's probably more of a threat, especially with his feet, is probably more Malik Willis than Jordan Love.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it gives them some optionality to mix things up on the offensive end, but he's certainly not the thrower and the deep ball, the connection that Jordan Love had with Christian Watson. It is non-existent with Malik Willis, and they become one of these plodding teams that, like Pittsburgh, like Carolina, they are not going to shock you with the big play. So that plays into the hands, of a Vance Joseph defense, of a Vic Fangio defense. They have the personnel to do it, but they are more than comfortable to just let the offense play in front, and they're not worried about giving up deep plays. So it gives me pause and caution that, of course, the teams that, eke into the playoffs and either have to travel on the road or, in Pittsburgh's case, have to welcome in one of the best defenses in the NFL. Like, I don't give them a ton of confidence, but nonetheless, I am excited to see, how things can be. And really, with the new playoff format, just how valuable getting that first round bye truly is for the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks, who, barely, it didn't look like they beat the brakes off the 49ers, but they just beat the absolute brakes off the 49ers, even if it wasn't reflected in the final score. That's a team who's got the best point differential in the NFL, I think, by 3 touchdowns, by 21 points, better than the next team. They're a juggernaut, and I'm truly worried about anyone that has to match up to them and go to Seattle in the month of January. But again, that's for later this week. It is Monday. It is Black Monday in the National Football League. So I thought we'd spend a few more minutes on the teams that clearly are missing out on the playoffs, and they have their own news to cover. We had 4 firings on Monday to join the Titans and the Giants, who had both let go of their coaches. The Cardinals let go of Jonathan Gannon. 3 seasons, they were 15-36. The Raiders let go of Pete Carroll, 3-14 in his only year. Kevin Stefanski, I wouldn't say shocking, but given where the Browns are, he was 46-58 in 6 years with the Browns. It is a guarantee that if you make the playoffs with the Cleveland Browns, you win Coach of the Year. Stefanski did that twice, so he won Coach of the Year twice. And then the Falcons completely cleaned their house. I believe the only organization that fired both their head coach and their general manager, with the Giants confirming that Joe Shane is coming back for next year. So where do you want to begin, Nick? Which opening is the most desirable, or the better question, the firing that was the most shocking to you?
Well, let's start with the one that's I believe it's the most desirable, and that would be the Arthur Blank led Atlanta Falcons. I know it may
Mm,
not seem like it is, but you still have Kirk Cousins because you paid him a gazillion dollars, thanks to Terry Fontenot, and then you also double down and you drafted Michael Penix, who came into the league with a knee injury, and he went out with a knee injury all the same. I still think that that is a great team to take over. You still have Kyle Pitts there. You still have Bajan Robinson,
yeah,
Drake
I was going to
London,
say, why lead
right?
with Kyle Pitts and you got Bijan?
Right. And then you have some nice defensive pieces because they showed down the stretch. They can finally play some freaking defense. And it makes you wonder, Alex, um, did those guys play their best football with the season closing out because they knew jobs were in jeopardy? And the question becomes, why didn't you play like that the entire year? And the Falcons beat the Saints to help the Panthers get into the playoffs over the Bucks, but it still wasn't enough to save Raheem Morris's job. But I'm sure he'll get another job somewhere, maybe as a receiver coach or a defensive coordinator. So I'm not worried about him. But that job is very enticing. And the reason being, you're in the NFC South. You see how chaotic that division is? You get a good coach in there, you add some players on both sides of the ball. Who's to say maybe that team doesn't do what Matt Ryan, Dan Quinn, and Kyle Shanahan did a couple years ago? Win that division, maybe get a top seed.
It really is an interesting situation, and I do like it. I mean, the reason why Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot both left, it's simple. Look, Terry Fontenot's draft history they get quality players, right? I mean, obviously taking Bijan at the top is pretty straightforward. Drake London, pretty straightforward. But addressing, you know, addressing the quarterback position, that is the only job that matters for the front office and for the general manager. And it was Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ritter. It was Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke. It was Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, and then it was Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. And for all the resources that they really have, spent on that position, they still really have no answers whatsoever. So it like that's why they're both looking for jobs. And clearly, the players love playing for Raheem Morris. They rattled off 5 straight. Like, the team was mathematically eliminated from the postseason on December 7th. It is January 5th, Monday, and they tied for first place in the division, right? Like, that goes to show you how they were playing for Raheem Morris. But I understand and fully respect Arthur Blank cleaning house, because how this team competed and how they address the quarterback position is an indictment on both head coach and GM. So I'm actually in concert with you. I do think it's a good position to be in, but no first round pick for this year. They're in cap purgatory because of the Kirk Cousins money that they're handing out. And Michael Penix, they're going to need to decide on a 5th-year option a year from now, which he's not going to get. So they're already starting over again. So you don't necessarily have all the resources that some of these other teams do have, but I think that's why the Falcons' job is interesting, because there's no GM there. I'll switch to the Cleveland Browns. They may have interesting pieces and certainly quality players on a roster that you can start a franchise with and also trade to get more assets that you want. They have 2 first-round picks for next draft, but you have to play ball with Andrew Berry, who structures contracts in a particular way that, like Philadelphia, creates money up front, but creates a lot of dead cap down the road. It's going to be hard to turn Cleveland into a contender because they are searching for a quarterback as well. But other than this past draft, a lot of swing and misses for Andrew Berry. They attacked and got quality pieces in this past draft. Mason Graham has worked out well. They were able to net another first rounder for him. They also got an additional 2nd-round pick that turned into Quinshawn Judkins, who's been a quality player for them when healthy. The offensive line is a mess. They don't really have any weapons outside of Judkins. And Njoku's entering as a free agent. Harold Fannin, a 3rd-round pick that worked out well for them. That's going to be a key piece of that offense. So I'm interested in what Cleveland has. However, I'm fully aware what they don't have and the uniqueness of working around an Andrew Berry and an ownership group led by Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah, first and foremost, I thought they made the right move firing Kevin Stefanski. I
Really?
know,
Okay. That was the
back
one that surprised me, I think.
yeah, I mean, that wasn't a surprise. It was just like, yeah, you have to do that. I would have been surprised had he kept his job, even though I know that there was several individuals promoting. Dan Orlovsky, my former Houston Texan teammate, kept promoting about, well, Stefanski, if he gets fired, he's going to get another job, and the Giants should be that team that gives him a call. Now,
I don't hate that.
well, the idea is that from what I was told, but Stefanski and Dan Orlovsky, they may have the same agent or agency. So if that is the case, then I understand why he's promoting
You know
that
what? That
number
that
3 move.
reminds me. Just to cut you off. I think maybe it was ESPN, or I saw this note going around that after he was fired, ESPN wanted to let us know that Kevin Stefanski disagreed with the Deshaun Watson trade, and it was reportedly ownership that pushed for it. I mean, I love the PR spin done by Stefanski's people. Too little, too late, considering this information gets sourced after he loses his job.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that, for me, I look at the whole quarterback situation and the debacle with Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders. Some may say that that has nothing to do with it. I said it has everything to do with it, because here's
There's
a
no
guy
plan.
who received Coach of the Year not once but twice, and the reason why that happened because he went to the playoffs in freaking Cleveland,
Yeah,
right?
the expectations are so low. I think the
So low.
contrast this year, you've got one of 3 coaches that are going to win Coach of the Year. They've each won 13 or 14 games. Like, Kevin Stefanski won it because of the expectations of a Cleveland Browns organization.
Right. And everyone talks about, I know Dan talks about it ad nauseum about how smart he is, how great of an offensive mind. And I'm thinking, okay, well, let me give Kevin Stefanski the benefit of the doubt. I don't know him, but let me look at what my eyes are telling me. If you're that much of an offensive genius, well, I didn't see you kind of working with a lot of creativity. And we could say, well, he didn't have all the necessary pieces. And I'll buy into that too as well. But when I look at the Shador Sanders, Dylan Gabriel situation, the idea is that you had two rookie quarterbacks. You knew injuries were a part of the game. You coached in this game a long time to know, but you didn't give one guy enough reps in practice. You didn't think to give him enough reps
Oh no.
in
Okay.
practice,
Okay.
right? So what
All
I
right.
mean,
All right. Okay.
that's true. That's real talk,
So
Alex.
I want to address, listen, I love all of our listeners, our viewers, and I know that there are a lot of tinfoil Shador Sanders people. I joined the ranks when Kevin Stefanski had no idea that he had the wrong play card for half the game, right? Shador Sanders said, I had the wrong plays for half the game. And Kevin Stefanski addressed it by saying, well, it was a short period of time that there was a miscommunication between me and the quarterback. Okay, that's when I say that is an absolute colossal disaster for your
Yes.
head coach. So, not as surprising as it had been in year past. I don't look at the resume and see two-time NFL head coach of the year. Show me what you've done lately. Lately, you put a quarterback out there with the wrong plays and didn't notice there was anything wrong for half the game.
Now that is coaching malpractice. And when you
That's
talk
the word I
about,
want,
yeah,
malpractice.
when you talk about how smart he is, how can you make that mistake, right? How can you make it? Listen, I'm glad that he voiced it. I give him credit for that. But just the fact that, hey man, you did a poor job or of preparing your quarterback because he goes out in the game with the wristband, the wrong wristband. And you don't know that? I mean, no, he deserved to be fired. The question is, I I was wondering if Andrew Berry was going to keep his job, but whatever he
I
said,
thought so too.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever he said to Jimmy Haslam, hey, he's good. So the question becomes, who's the next head coach? Is this one of those jobs that you want to take? Yes, you have Miles Garrett, who broke the single season sack record, but is that enough to take this job? And then what is the direction of the offense? Do you want to go out and get another quarterback? Were you happy with some
Yes.
of what you saw with the two young quarterbacks? What do you do? And in this draft class, this is not a great draft class for quarterbacks. So we know Fernando Mendoza is probably going to be selected number one overall because I don't
Right.
see that the
Yeah. Are the
Raiders
Raiders trading out of that spot? I don't
trading
think
out.
so.
So
No.
now you have what Julian saying maybe you have Dante
No, it's
Moore
it,
of
Dante Moore, maybe. You see Moore's comments like, I'm not going to come out, and be the quarterback for the Jets. I think that might apply for the Browns as well. Um, it's a tough place to need a quarterback. They do have the two first round picks, right? So they could go hunting for one. But hey, they just used two draft picks on two quarterbacks, and
I'm
that's
saying.
the Andrew Berry issue for me. Like Atlanta, they do not know how to address the quarterback position. Have been unable to do it after they ran their franchise quarterback out of town. Like
Well, see,
that was all.
okay, what I'm going to suggest is not popular. It's definitely not. And I
Okay.
just told you. Sit tight with these two quarterbacks. You still have Deshaun Watson on the books, right? You still have him on the books. That's not the worst case scenario, but doing what you've done in the past, constantly throwing the baby out with the bathwater, going back and say, well, let's draft another quarterback. How many quarterbacks are you going to draft? You realize you have done a crappy job of that. And oh, by the way, let's just say that you drafted a Dante Moore or you use one of your picks, your first round and the second round, the package to get another team's backup quarterback, you're still potentially in quarterback purgatory because you can't keep him upright. Like Cam Robinson, the former second round pick out of Alabama, number 68, man, he was horrible.
Yep.
Horrible this
Yep.
season. So if you go get a quarterback, well, did you give him wide receivers? Did you fix the offensive line? So they have an uphill climb, and I don't envy them, but I wonder who's going to take this job because whomever takes it could be out in another 2 to 3 seasons.
So the Deshaun Watson money, right? So if you're, I guess this doesn't really apply. I'm not going to get to it. I can't get too into the weeds. basically, right, their offensive line is old, and a lot of them are set to be free agents. Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, both their starting guards, free agents. They're also due a ton of void. Like again, this is the Andrew Berry thing, and part of finding a head coach in Cleveland is they have to play ball with how Andrew Berry structures contracts. Both of those offensive linemen, both of their starting guards are leaving in free agency. They're paying them out in dead money for the next 4 years. That's not just them. I mean, Deshaun Watson won't play for them, but next year when they can finally cut him, that's $26 million against the cap, which is great. I mean, they could try to get rid of him now for $80 million. We saw your Broncos do it with Russ, but it is just it works in Philadelphia. It does not work in Cleveland. So the Andrew Berry thing, like you need to find a coach who is okay and willing to deal with the New Orleans Saints, Philadelphia Eagles type of structure of assembling a roster. And I don't think every coach is built for that. But at least there's we liked some things about it. You have quarterbacks under contract, at least whether or not they can be starters. I think taking both of these guys, you were looking for a long-term backup, right? Shador or Dylan Gabriel can be your backup for the next 4 years or so, but they're still missing, a starting quarterback. Look, would they be the type of team that would trade for a Kyler Murray because the Arizona Cardinals are where they are and they fired Jonathan Gannon? They lost 9 straight, 14 of their last 15. I was inspired. I was like, wow, this is a stat that I would love to find. Where's that one stat for every team that fired their coach? This really only applies to Arizona. The Cardinals, Nick Ferguson, have been a franchise for over 100 years, right? They still have not kept a head coach for 6 consecutive seasons or more.
Well, that tells you everything you need to know about the Arizona Cardinals. And it goes back to a lot of these front offices and billionaire owners, they really have no idea. Now, they look at other teams and say, well, you know what? I want what they have. I want what the New England Patriots have. I wanted that 20 years of Patriots way football and our coach and our quarterback ride off in the sunset. Oh, by the way, we want to have some playoff appearances and a couple of Super Bowls. Are we asking for
Yes.
too much, football gods? But they go about it the wrong way. They don't have a plan. They look at what someone else is doing around the NFL or even in their own conference's division. They want to replicate it, but they don't do it in the right way because they don't know how to build an actual team. Now, you think they do, right? They tell you they do, but they don't. They keep going out and get another coach. Like when I think about Jonathan Gannon's situation, I feel as though he got a raw deal in a sense. Not as bad as Steve Wilkes received as
Yeah.
the Cardinals head
All
coach.
right, sell me. Yeah.
Right. Because wait, Wilkes came in and took over a team that was already historically bad. Oh, by the way, he drafted Josh Rosen in the first round, right?
Yes. That
Rosen
was
was
Steve Wilkes,
Steve Wilkes.
unilaterally, all by himself.
Right. So they were not great. You bringing in a rookie quarterback, you need time to get him up to speed. He only had one season. That was it. And he was fired. Almost like a Gerard Mayo, if you will, right? So
Well, Steve Wilkes didn't have some of the comments that Gerard Mayo made.
probably didn't, but either way, you had two coaches who had rookie quarterbacks who were asked to do a lot. One, with the Patriots, they were known for playing in meaningful games. Carolina, not so much. But with
Yeah,
Jonathan
nor
Gannon,
Arizona, yeah.
right. So with Jonathan Gannon, you didn't have a great roster for one. There were questions and concerns about your quarterback, so much so they had to put in his contract that he spent more time, you know, dedicated to his craft than
Yeah.
dedicated to his I guess craft of playing video games, right? So that still blows my mind. But once again, who's the next coach who will be willing to take over and with the Cardinals, knowing as though here's what or how the team has operated in the past. I too can be here for 2 to 3 years, but I know some guys, especially minority coaches, they take that job because they know that that job may only come around once in a lifetime.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And it's a tough position to be because a head coach that's interviewing, you don't know what the status is of Kyler Murray, right?
No,
Like, are you more inclined to take that position knowing he's gone or knowing that he's there?
but for me, I would go in knowing as though he's gone because I don't want to be attached to that guy who hasn't played well. I've seen what other head coaches, Cliff Kingsbury, now Jonathan Gannon, now fired. I don't want any part of that. I want to come in. I want to choose my guy. And like Pete Carroll told me when I did a coaching internship with the Seattle Seahawks several years ago, at some point as a head coach, you're going to get fired because you're hired to get fired. At least if you're going to get fired doing it your way. So no, I don't want Kyler Murray. I want a fresh start with my guy, even if I get fired behind whomever I choose.
I thought it was weird, not I don't think officially fired, but Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders potentially splitting. I thought that was an interesting footnote that sort of popped up during the coaching cycle, and not for I think he's expected to take more head coaching interviews, but I thought that if he was comfortable, he had a lot of opportunities certainly after the first year, and that Commanders team went to the NFC Championship game. We'll have to kind of see how things look underneath Dan Quinn, given how disappointing that Commanders team was, with the fast start they had 2 years ago. You know what team never had a fast start?
Who's that?
The Vegas Raiders, who fired Pete. You know what? That's a lie. They beat the New England Patriots in Week 1. That was their fast start. And then, since firing John Gruden in 2021, the Raiders will now be looking for their 5th head coach.
So it was Gruden, then it was Josh McDaniels. Then after Josh McDaniels,
Bisaccia,
well, okay,
McDaniels.
Bisaccia's an interim, and then it was Josh McDaniels, and then
Yep,
Antonio Pierce was the interim. Then he
yep,
was the coach for a bit. Then they fired him, and then they hired Pete Carroll.
yep,
Right? Man,
yep. And now
talk-
Tom Brady. Look,
your
Fox
guy,
doesn't have.
your guy,
Well,
Brady,
listen,
your
listen. We
guy.
sort of walked over this with the Falcons, but Matt Ryan reportedly asking about handling both his broadcasting duties and a potential front office role with the Falcons. I mean, look, Tom Brady bought an ownership stake in the team. If Mark Davis wants him in the building, he's in the building. I just love that. Well, now Tom Brady's prepared to have his boots on the ground because, oh yeah, he doesn't really have any assignments for Fox, like he does during the regular season. So this experiment of allowing Brady to be this hands-on, and he was this past offseason in handpicking Geno Smith, in selecting Pete Carroll, like it is definitely a warning. This Raiders franchise was bad before he got there. They'll be bad after he leaves, but Brady does not want to fall in the Michael Jordan route with the disaster he was with the Washington Wizards organization, right? Like for all the love and respect that Jordan has as a player, it's a very different game trying to play the game of chess and move things around. And he was with John Spytek going back to Michigan, so these guys are close. And if they have a plan, great. But their first big swing with Pete Carroll was just a complete disaster. I don't know, Nick, is that just 74 years old? Your message isn't the same? Or you can't just, let's just do Legion of Boom again, except you don't have that personnel in Vegas. Like, it is, it is a tough situation to be. I am one that says Max Crosby wants to be a Raider for life. Let him be a Raider for life. If I'm Cleveland, I want Myles Garrett out of here. But if I'm the Raiders, I do want him there. However, if someone sends you an enticing offer, are you willing to part 2, 3 first-round picks if it means you can hopefully, find somebody like a Max Crosby in the draft, or at least go get you a quarterback? The Raiders have to be one of the more coveted positions that's available because they have the number 1 pick, because they're in Las Vegas. However, do you take pause because Tom Brady is the one, puppeteering things? So we think.
Yeah, I do take a little pause because once again, his guy Spytek is in a certain GM position. And the one thing I know about being a leader is that you have to be able to step in and hold people accountable, whether that is family or friend. And can Tom actually do that and do it in a great way? I don't know. It didn't seem as though that happened this season. And let's just be totally honest about the Raiders kind of franchise situation. They, like many other teams, we talk about Cleveland, we talked about the Cardinals in Arizona. They're chasing, they're hoping to duplicate something that other teams have done. but they have to realize you're not on that particular level. And to build a house, you first must build the foundation first. You just can't, just get the crate, sit it down, draw some windows on it, cut it out. No, that's not how this works. So it's going to take some time for this to kind of manifest. And for Pete Carroll, yeah, maybe he was trying to replicate the Legion of Boom, but he had time to build up that team, to get certain pieces of wide receivers, running back, and do that. The Raiders didn't really give him that opportunity, and vice versa, because time was of the essence. They were watching Kansas City change the narrative. Then you now seeing the Denver Broncos, and they're going, "Why not us? Why not us?" So they tried to fast track it, and you know this, man. If you're gonna cook an omelet, man, hey man, that's a slow process. You got to let the yolk cook, and then you got to flip it. They were trying to just preheat at 225 and just cook it, boom, bam, playoff team, and it didn't really work out for him. And Pete Carroll, he didn't have the proper players. Let's be totally honest. And when we saw Chip Kelly get fired, I thought that was some BS too, because you trade Jacoby Myers. I don't have outside weapons. Brock Bowers comes into the season already banged up. We draft Ashton Genty in the first round. He was not going to change anything all by himself. Then also too, I had Geno Smith, who I still think is a decent quarterback, but you don't have any weapons. And then your defense outside of Max Crosby was completely terrible. So they were set up for failure from the jump. And once again, who's the next coach to come in? I'm asking questions. Who's going to be my quarterback? If it's going to be Fernando Mendoza, okay, am I going to have carte blanche to build this team, or is it Tom Brady and Spytek building this team? Because if I'm going to get fired, once again, I want to get fired doing my way, not Spytek's way, and then Spytek throws me under the bus because he's best friends with Tom Brady. No.
Look, you talk about the omelet and the let's see, the ingredients that made this egg dish work. Here we go, metaphors. The ingredients that made Geno Smith work in Seattle was, a good interior offensive line, which, cratered, and his play did as a result, which is why, they took Gray Zabel and they reworked that offensive line. They were great this year. Like, they got Ashton Genty. They put the green onions on the raw egg. They didn't cook anything else. They didn't, they didn't need to take a running back. It was basically a repeat of Josh Jacobs, right? They did not have the infrastructure to support a top running back like that. Now, look, is he a generational talent that only comes around once in a while? Well, it's the wrong position, and a year later, Jeremiah Love looks like a great running back in this draft class. So I just don't necessarily believe with the thought process, which we know Spytek and Brady were heavily involved on. And like the offensive line is it's a disaster. Not only that, they tried to surround Geno Smith with weapons. You said, where are the weapons? Where are the weapons? Well, they used the second round pick on Jack Besh, who couldn't get on the football field until they trade Jacoby Myers. They used a fourth round pick on Deontay Thornton, who, barely played 4 or 5 games. Like, they're using 2 day 2 picks on players that are not getting on the field. So what is our philosophy here, right? You draft these guys, use significant draft capital for them, and they don't play. Like, at a certain point, you need to understand what it is, especially when the season, tail spins out of control. But what are they doing instead? Well, we'll bring in Tyler Lockett, and he's going to play snaps for us. Well, we're good, like Amari Cooper showed up to this team in August and said, thanks, but no thanks, I'm going to retire. Like, that should have been the writing on the wall. And yet somehow they beat the Patriots and ultimately decided the fate of the AFC and who gets the first round bye.
Isn't
But I
that
digress.
How about the irony of that? Even Pete Carroll on his way out, he still has a way of to screw the Patriots. How about that?
Yes. It is 1995 all over again. We're going super long here, but to wrap up, we talked about the 4 teams in depth. Anything on the Titans and anything on the Giants?
Well, the Giants' job, once again, it's a very intriguing job. You have Jackson Dart. The question you worry about him is the number of concussions he's received this past season. But
Too many.
they're a very young, talented team, and their defense, man. If you get a great defensive coordinator to come in there and he's creative, that can really turn around that NFC East for the Giants. But once again, it's if Joe Shane is running the show,
He is. It was
it,
just confirmed today that he was being kept. And here is the line. Here's the line from Dan Duggan of The Athletic. Quote, as discouraging as that decision is for fans who somehow still muster support for a team that is getting further from its proud history with each passing tradition, that's the ownership's right. And this is talking about John Mara. If your grandfather had spent $500 to purchase the Giants in 1925, you too could make decisions that prioritize keeping family members and allies in cushy roles as the franchise bottoms out during one of the worst stretches in its 101-year history. Joe Shane, he's a friend of the Maras. He's allowed to stick around despite going 13-38 in the past 3 years.
that's kind of crazy that those types of things have happened with the organization and a far cry away from the Tom Coughlin of years. And I know some players didn't like Coughlin because he kind of the way that he ran his ship, right?
Yep.
It was
If you're
like a
on time, you're
midshipman.
late. Yep. Yep.
Right. But ask those that Giants organization. They love for to have that accountability back in the organization and have this team back in the national conversation. So it's going to be another one of those interesting jobs to see, well, whomever is hired as head coach, how much authority he's going to have in building
Virtually
out.
none. I mean,
But,
virtually none,
well, for
right?
me, then
Like,
I'm not taking the job.
yeah.
I'm not taking the job. Why?
Yep.
Because now I'm tied to this GM who's shown that he can't make great decisions. So if things don't go well, what
Like,
happens to me?
it's one thing, like, the record speaks for itself, right? But sometimes things get swept under the rug because we don't necessarily see it, right? Back-to-back years, we have Joe Shane on tape, on film, the NFL Hard Knocks offseason
Yeah.
edition, which, surprise, was canceled after 1 year,
Because
completely
because of
blowing
who?
it on Saquon Barkley. And then the
Yes.
next year, they have NFL Films back to keep the cameras rolling throughout the draft, and Brian Daboll is pleading that they make the trade to go back and get 26th overall to take Jackson Dart. And Joe Shane says, look, we're going to miss this third-round pick, but if you believe he's the guy, go ahead. And in the exit press conferences, when Shane is there and Daboll's already been fired, Shane says, well, we can hang our hats on Jackson Dart. He's the guy. Taking a victory lap after being caught on camera telling Brian Daboll, that's your guy. If this doesn't work, I'm washing my hands of it. Well, it was pretty exciting. It kind of looked like it worked. And all of a sudden, let's give Joe Shane the credit for Jackson Dart being there.
Hey man, this is where you have to be careful about these situations. It's a dog eat dog world. People are always going to look to save their jobs first. And this is why let me go back quickly to Arthur Blank and the Falcon situation. It's going to be really important for them to hire their GM first and then allow the GM to therefore hire the next head coach. Because if not, if you hire the head coach first, the head coach is going to have more power than the GM. But the idea is that you want both of these guys to be on the same page. And, we heard about what was it? Matt Ryan being involved with the
Yeah,
Falcons in
yeah,
some particular
yeah.
way, and Troy Aikman being involved with helping the Miami Dolphins select the next GM. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be wrong. What does he know about, finding another GM? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But I find all these moves very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things are wrapped up before we even get to February.
So the Falcons, I'll end on this. Uh, the the Falcons, how do I put this? When you were in Houston, was your GM Rick Smith?
Yes.
Rick Smith, I believe, was interviewed for the Falcons GM
Yes, he
position,
was.
and he lost out to Terry Fontenot. I believe the Falcons hired a consulting firm that ultimately helped make the decision on whether or not to fire Terry Fontenot. I believe heading that independent office was one Rick Smith. So correct me if I'm wrong. The Falcons didn't pick him to be their GM, but did pick him to ultimately can the guy who beat him out for the interview. And I believe Rick
Mhm.
Smith will then try to interview to become the GM for Atlanta again.
Well, that
Is that somehow more dysfunctional than the Tennessee
that
Titans that have the worst record had the worst record, like had frankly the worst and most underprepared head coach in NFL history?
well, I mean, the Falcons are not that bad. The Titans are in totally disarray, man. And
Here was the number of the 241 NFL coaches who have coached at least 20 games or more since the merger. Brian Callahan ranks 237th of 241 with a 17% winning percentage.
well, that goes back, Alex, to desperation, not really thoroughly thinking out these situations, but also looking at other teams. And we've seen it happen before. Teams that go to the Super Bowl, constant playoff teams. You want a piece of their organization. You want to find ways to pick their brains and how to make your organization better. But once again, in a lot of these cases, that doesn't always equate to success because they say desperate times call for desperate measures. I have another way of looking at it. Desperate times make people do dumb-ish,
Yeah.
right? And
Okay.
I'll leave it right there.
So confirming, this is from Diana Rossini. The Falcons have requested to interview Seahawks OC Clint Kubiak, former Texans GM Rick Smith, who is part of the sportsology firm auditing Atlanta, worked with Clint's father Gary in Houston and with Nick Ferguson in 2006.
Very, very true, and I know Clint very well. So that could be a recipe because here's why it could make sense. Here's why. When Gary Kubiak stepped away when he was the offensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings, you know who stepped in? Clint Kubiak. And you can go back there, you can look at the stats, and I think what year was that? I want to say, was it 2021 or 2022? Hey, I'm thrown off on a year, but Kirk Cousins had one of his best years, and I would dare say that was one of the years that helped propel him to a point where the Falcons were willing to give him as much money as they gave him. So that's a guy who knows Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins knows him. You're already paying him a crap ton of money. You have Michael Penix on a rookie deal, so you don't have to make a decision on him right away and you got Kyle Pitts, and you have Drake London. But more importantly, you have a freaking Bijan Robinson. And what the guys who have coached under the Shanahan tree know how to do, they run the freaking ball, right? Right? They're not like some of these other coaches that pass the ball to pass the ball. No, they run the ball to set up the pass. And looking at what is taking place with Sam Darnold, right, who was known as somewhat of a turnover machine and was quite inconsistent, how can you not interview Clint Kubiak and pair him with Rick Smith? How can you not? I'm just
Nick
saying.
Ferguson, it all goes back to the 2006 Houston Texans. And
Yeah.
no, we will not bring up Aaron Glenn and the New York Jets record that will never be broken. An entire season without an interception, never done in NFL history.
How to tip
We're not even going to mention it. Takeaways, who needs them? Nick, we're going to take it away here after almost an hour. I was like, well, we should do 2 episodes. Nope, we got a mega super packed episode just for you covering week 18 and Black Monday. But again, we're already creeping. Like later this week, we'll be back with Wild Card Weekend. These head coaching openings are going to be fascinating. We're going to follow them. Again, Nick Ferguson, if you need me to forward the performance you did in my Madden franchise mode as head coach of the Patriots, it would look like a great line item on the resume. I will have you know you did retire, and I believe the quote was, "I ran out of fingers for my Super Bowl rings." So that's for you, my man. He's Nick Ferguson, former 10-year NFL safety, and in an alternate reality in Madden '06 on the PlayStation 2, a
Yeah.
multiple Super Bowl head coach, winning head coach. So later this week, those guys, wherever you find your podcast, YouTube as well, we're covering these wild card games because they're, I mean, just take it away. I want to get into it right now.
Well, I tell you, it's going to be one heck of a wild card weekend. We would definitely get into it later, but I'll leave you guys with this. Pray if you are a fan of one of the teams that's not in wild card weekend and your coach has just been fired. Pray to the football gods. Pray, get on your knees and wish that, guess what? You too, next year, this time, will find yourself in the playoffs opposed to sitting on the sidelines like Alex and I are doing, watching the football games.
Man, they need them some Steelers holy water, that's for sure.